So if you would just kind of share a little bit of your background and then lead into, how did you encounter mushrooms? How did you get into it? And where are we now? So first, a little bit of background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. So should I start off by saying my name?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. My name is Julie Fry. My background's in biology, chemistry, biochemistry, pharmacology, and quality management systems, or QMS for short. I have been interested in science and mathematics from a young age. My mom was a mathematician and a chemist by training and education. And so before I could before I was learning the ABCs, I was learning long division.
Oh, wow.
I'm exaggerating and I'm joking a bit, but
I know, sure. Because I hated long division. Yeah. Short division, long division.
Yeah, she was actually in third grade. I was learning how to do long division and long multiplication in my head. So wow. I got kind of an advanced start when it comes to scientific topics, and by the 10th grade, I knew I wanted to study biology. I didn't know where I was going to do it, but I knew that's what I was passionate about. And I encountered some trauma in my childhood, like most people. Sure. And by the time I got to college, I was fortunate enough to go to college. And by the time I got there, in my first month of college, my dorm mate set up a sting operation on me and got me arrested for
smoking. In terms of use of mushrooms then,
the first time I ever took mushrooms was a couple years later.
Okay.
So I didn't actually take them until I was 21, and my girlfriends were taking them at the time, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, Julie, this is like amazing. You got to try this. You got to try this out." And I was like, "All right, let's do it."
Okay.
And so that was how we did it back in the day. We didn't have Google. We didn't have Airwid.
Right.
Yeah, and we were terrified to even type it into the existing search engines.
Okay.
Yeah, man. This was like back in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my friend she had taken 3.5 grams, and she said, "Yeah, we'll just take 3.5 grams and like have fun." And I was like, "Sounds great." So my first journey was with 3.5 grams. My second journey was with 3.5 grams. So many of my subsequent journeys were with 3.5 grams. I actually
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I only lowered to this idea of microing in recent years.
Okay.
Like I pretty much regularly did around 3.5 grams for the first 15 years of using mushrooms. Yeah.
Wow. So what was the benefit of that? What was, obviously it had been criminalized, which is the similar situation with cannabis. But what have you learned since then about mushrooms, and how did it impact you when you used it? What was the reason for its use when you did?
Well,
just recreationally, or were you intentional?
Yeah, I mean, that was how it was presented at the time, was as a recreational, thing. But I remember when I was 26, I had a really profound trip where the mushrooms basically told me what Terence McKenna has always asserted, that the reason why they're illegal is because they force upon us the questioning of our existing paradigms. And we start to wonder if these systems in place are to our benefit.
Okay.
And basically the mushrooms start to show you that you don't have to exist in that world. You don't have to play by the rules, and you can create your own game, basically.
Okay.
And that's a challenge to the powers that be, and that's why they have the illegal status that they do, not because they're harmful in any way whatsoever.
Okay.
They're only
And
harmful to the existing paradigms and infrastructure of our planet.
Yeah. And therefore, is it then safe to say that are they addictive or not? That's one of the things someone mentioned. They're not addictive. Not at all.
They have no addictive potential whatsoever. Even if you enjoyed that 3.5 gram trip, which you may or may not,
right. Yeah, that's the point.
Most people won't wake up the next day. And first of all, most people won't wake up the next day and be like, I want to do that again. And secondly, even if you did wake up the next day and said, I want to do that again, you could take 3.5 grams and you wouldn't get the same experience. And by day 10, you wouldn't even feel it. So you'd just be munching on mushrooms for no reason. Hence, no addictive potential. And in fact, because of the way that they work, because they are intelligent, but because of the way that they work in synergistically with our neurophysiology in terms of promoting neuroplasticity and how do you say propagating or facilitating neuroplasticity and circumventing our default mode network way of thinking, they disrupt addictive behaviors. So if you have a porn addiction, a gambling addiction, cocaine addiction, a prostitute addiction, whatever kind of addiction you have, if you take mushrooms, if you take a high dose of mushrooms, I guarantee you're coming out of that trip and it will be gone, eliminated like that. I would be willing to bet all of Bill Gates' money on that.
All of Bill Gates' money. Are you serious? Really?
Yes. Yeah.
They can. And you mentioned disrupting something, the terminology you just used.
The default mode network. Default mode network way of thinking.
Meaning
sometimes I'm thinking faster than I can speak things, and then the words get jumbled. So sorry about that.
Sure, but the default mode network, how can you break that down in simpler forms when you say default mode network?
Yeah. Okay, so we have our like autopilot. We go into autopilot most days, especially if you've got like a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job kind of thing. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the coffee maker, you pour yourself a cup of coffee, you make your scrambled eggs and toast, you eat your scrambled eggs and toast, you take the same route to work, you do the same
or
habits. And so you have this default autopilot way of operating. And it's hard for people to break out of that way of thinking and think in new ways without some type of interfering factor. Whether that's coming internally, which is challenging because then you have to already break out of it to break out of it kind of thing.
You have to do it. You have to do it consciously, really. You have to make yourself kind of do something. Okay.
Exactly.
And many of us don't do that.
And so I think that's challenging for most people.
Sure.
And so some of the things that, well, one thing in particular, I'll always come back to mushrooms. One thing in particular that's an external source of disrupting that DMN, that default mode network. One thing that exists that already does that is mushrooms. Boom, you take mushrooms, you disrupt that default mode network, you get neural networks that wouldn't normally communicate to speak to one another. And you create new pathways in your brain. In fact, neurogenesis is how do you say, like, not exists. I want to use a different word. Neurogenesis continues for up to a month after doing a high dose mushroom trip. So you're still growing neurons even up to a month afterwards. It's like it would be what I would equate to or name as the equivalent of when you study for an exam When
Okay.
you're studying for an exam, you're even after the exam date is over, for a month after that, you're still creating new connections. You're still having neurogenesis occur.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Now, is this only the case with magic mushrooms in terms of what we're talking about? Or I have been ingesting mushrooms in the form of coffee or, eating in my salads and soups and whatever. And what I heard is that mushrooms also help to rebuild some brain neurological networks.
Yeah.
Is this the case with any mushroom that you're consuming?
Well, not if you're like consuming a white angel death cap, right? You consume that once you're dead. So some you can eat all mushrooms, but some you can only eat once. But
that must be true.
But we are, I like to say we're walking fungal electrical tubes.
Okay.
We're moving, walking fungal electrical tubes. Because when you look at biology and people, like for instance, studying molecular biology, what they're using primarily as model organisms is yeast, which is a type of fungus. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same type of budding yeast that's used to create alcoholic beverages. And the reason why they use yeast is because there's a lot of the genes that are present in yeast in that fungus that are analogous to or similar to the ones that we humans have. So we are basically a walking, moving fungus. We have an electrical wiring network within us, right? Same as fungus do, same as all things have a way of conducting electricity, but we actually have a nervous system created out of nerves that have electrical nerve impulses. So we're a walking electrical fungal tube. We have a tube from one end to the other, right? So it's putting it in the most simplistic terms, but basically because of that, like it would make sense that there will be other fungi that benefit the way that we operate. And there will be fungi that take away from the way we operate. Some like like a slug, for instance, might be able to eat honey fungus, but honey fungus is toxic to us.
Okay.
So like not every fungus benefits every species, and it's about finding what works with us. Like for instance, lion's mane, as you mentioned, the neuroprotective and neurogenesis benefits of certain mushrooms, like lion's mane is a good example. And there's a lot of indigenous societies that basically say, well, look at the structure of whatever it is that you're thinking about consuming, and from that you'll be able to know what it's beneficial for. So for instance, there's a plant that you might know already called guaco bush, for instance, and it's a leafy vine that grows in the overgrowth and it covers everything. And so in that way, if you think about it, you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, it's growing and it's covering everything. What about us grows and covers everything? The skin is our largest organ. So guaco bush is really, really good for skin conditions. And in the same way, if you look at a lion's mane mushroom, you think, that looks awfully similar to the folds and creases in a brain structure. So what is that good for? Probably our brain.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are a ton of functional mushrooms, lion's mane just being one of them, but I'm sure you've also heard of like
others.
Reishi, chaga, and cordyceps, all of the all the standard ones. All the time.
They're all listed in the coffee that I drink. It's not coffee, but yeah, they list all the different mushrooms that are in there, the benefits. So
is that the Four Sigmatic?
Pardon me?
Is that Four Sigmatic one that you take? The brand?
It's the brand is Rise, RYZE.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Yeah,
you know that one.
Nice.
Yes,
yeah,
that one. Several of them in there, and it really helps with digestion, and it's pretty interesting. I feel it. I can tell the difference, at least in my digestion, my stomach, when I start my day with that now. So it does have some of those benefits that it does mention, and I'm on a Facebook page that people who drink this coffee, they always talking about the how they benefit from it as well. One of the things that's fascinating to me about what you said is actually this whole concept of mushrooms and disrupting neural patterns, or what have you, the big word used, is the article you wrote about the impact on relationships, because there seems to be this, it made perfect sense to me when I read it. Just the first few pages, it hit home. And I can see how therapists can use it then to guide their clients. So can you talk a little bit about that and how mushrooms would be able to do that based on what you explained in terms of how the brain works and our past traumas and how that impacts the triggers that we have in our relationships, and how mushrooms can help to alleviate some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm just going to go even deeper for a second and talk about how, like, the inception point of the thoughts that we have becoming matter, and how, did you see that outside? Okay, sorry. It's just an inside joke.
I read the cheat.
Actually, shit. Can you pause for a second, or I'm going to come back to that question, but I just realized, okay, all right, so back to the question. Okay, so basically, when we're talking about the inception point from thought to matter, like, basically, sure, we get stuck in patterns in our own lives, but we don't recognize that because of the patterns that we're stuck in our own lives, they become externalized, and they keep showing up in our external lives and in the interactions that we have with other people. And until we address those patterns within ourselves, they're going to keep showing up again and again.
Okay.
In our life and in our interpersonal relationships. Exactly. And so that's why a lot of people, like the new agey woke folk, will talk about attracting what you want into your life in terms of a relationship, but first it necessitating you addressing yourself and healing yourself.
That's correct.
Yes. And so maybe this sounds bizarre to some people, but all of existence is patterns. Like, and I think one of the most fascinating things about mushrooms is when you're actually in the trip, you see that essentially everything gets broken down into geometric fractal patterns. And that was one of the first times I realized that, essentially everything, that's why the saying exists, as it is below, so it is above, and so on, and vice versa, because everything exists in infinite fractal patterns from the macroscopic to the microscopic. And that means that if you don't address the pattern, it's going to keep showing up until you do. And that's where mushrooms can come in and help. And specifically with interpersonal relationships, because we all, like I said before, most of us, maybe not all of us, but I would wager probably most of us, if not all of us, have had some kind of trauma in our childhood.
Right.
And because our parents, regardless of whether or not they're the best parents on the planet, or the worst, are going to traumatize us somehow,
some way,
no matter what. They all manage somehow.
Yes.
So we none of us are perfect, and we all need to be dealt with in different ways. And sometimes there's a Leo raising a Pisces, or whatever. Like, just
sure.
Just getting into like get maybe the pseudoscience of it. A lot of people call it pseudoscience. I can go into astrology. That's a whole other tangent. But anyway, the point being is that their way of relating to us might not be a way that's conducive to our best outcome, to the behavior that they're trying to elicit or to encourage.
Got you.
So the result, okay, we're traumatized. All right. So now what do we do? If we don't want that pattern to keep showing up in our life, in our adult lives, and if we don't want to promote the development of some type of pathophysiology, because what generally tends to happen, like they say, the body keeps score, right? So what generally tends to happen is if we don't deal with that trauma, psychological trauma, the only difference between psychological and physiological is that you can't see the psychological necessarily. But if it
right.
showed up like a physiological wound, some people would have, gaping holes in their abdomen with their guts spilling out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're just they're walking around like everything's cool. And you're like, yo, bro, your literal duodenal tract is dragging on the floor, man. Like, you probably should deal with that. So,
Sure.
So we need to first, like, get all the organs back inside us and suture ourselves up before we can
go on. Okay, so what that was perfectly said. And I wanted to build on that because you mentioned before we can even engage in a healthy relationship, we have to deal with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But can you even address issues in isolation, or do you need to be in a relationship to be able to actually deal with and address somebody's pointing out to you, whether it's your guts are hanging out there? If there's no one there to tell you, you're just going to walk around with it because you think that's either normal or you don't even see it. So if you're not in a relationship, how would you be able to deal with that? Or do you need to be in a relationship to be able to navigate?
I absolutely love that question because I feel like everything's gravy when we're in isolation. We're just on our own. Like, perfect. Oh yeah, sure, I've dealt with that trauma. I've figured out how to solve that problem. And then next thing you know,
I like my gut hanging out.
Yeah.
Some people are like, I like you.
I think I'm fine. Yeah.
I wear it as a scarf. Like,
thank you.
But like it's easy to say that you've healed and that you've gotten where you need to go when you're not in an interpersonal relationship that really challenges you and reflects back onto you the things that you thought that you solved and the things that you thought that you healed. And so I would say that it's in my opinion, it's better to try to address them when they come up in the interpersonal relationship. But not every partner that you're like, not every participant in the relationship is going to be ready to address the thing. So I think that's the other thing is it's important to try to find people who are willing to go on that journey of growth and healing with you. Or let's say growth. My friend, actually, he's like, I don't like the word healing because it implies that you're sick. And I'm like, well, I mean, the guts hanging on the ground, like I'm not entirely sure that they're not, but for the sake of the argument, let's say revitalization process. Okay. So a constant journey of revitalization.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So then, how would mushrooms facilitate this? How would mushrooms facilitate me engaging more harmoniously in a relationship than if I didn't have it? And my triggers now, they're still there, or are they not there because I'm now in this trip or having this trip?
Wow, that's a really great question. So I would say it's more like you're able to find a different way of, you're able to reframe. You're able to reframe the way that you think about the things that you thought that you knew. Okay. So I'll just use myself as an example. During one 5-gram trip that I did, I used to have a compulsive hand washing issue, like to the point where if I touched, the computer screen or my book, and then I couldn't touch my face, or like I couldn't touch strawberry and then touch my face or my hair, or whatever. Like I would hold my hands like kind of, and I would wash my hands between 200 and 300 times a day. So it got to the point where the issue was crippling, and it was crippling my ability to function, and it was crippling my ability to coexist with my partner. And so I took 5 grams of mushrooms, and within the first 45 minutes, hour of the trip, it was gone. Because the mushrooms were like, yo, whatever. Can I cuss on here? Probably not. Whatever effing made you think that you had control over any of this? Like, why on earth are you hanging on so hard to that control that you don't even have? Okay. And after that trip was over, it was just done. I stopped washing my hands.
Like, no. What are you?
Of course, if I'm doing food preparation and I just touched my hand and wash my hands, you know what I mean? Like, the things where it
obsessively.
logically makes sense to do so.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm not.
hygiene. She still has
Yeah,
some
I still have hygiene. I'm just not
Sure,
overdoing it
I got
excessively.
you. I understood that. Yes, that you're not obsessing about it anymore. You obviously wash your hands, but not 300 times a day or 200 times. I
Right,
understand.
exactly. Not every time I touch a door handle. So,
Yes.
I have
Yeah.
a very sad story. Could I tell that?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I used to work in the psychiatric or in a sanatorium. And if I knew back then we had mushrooms, we could have helped that young guy. He was a 16-year-old boy. They did some science project in school and he saw how much germs they were everywhere, right? So he developed a phobia, like he couldn't get out of bed. He was peeing and doing everything in the bed.
What?
And like, yeah. And we had him, on this sick medication, and knowing mushrooms could have been boom, get you off that trip, whatever, your fear triggered something in him, right?
okay.
Got him totally in his fear mindset. So
Okay.
So
He got.
it was a
these
reframing.
kinds of
Yeah,
things.
it's a reframing.
I was good. Perfect. And that was what I meant, because you were in a pattern. You got trapped in this pattern of hand washing because you were aware, what have you. And in order to break that pattern, now, my question is, were you intentional when you took that 5 grams? Did you
No,
intend
actually,
on saying, I'd like to address this issue, or the mushrooms just went away?
they force it on you, and that's the other thing I really, really love about mushrooms. Is even if your intention is like, I want to get to the bottom of this, maybe I should say, regardless of whether your intention is to get to the bottom of something, or it's just to have fun.
Okay.
You take the mushrooms, and if you take a high enough dose, they are like holding a mirror with a magnifying glass up to your soul. Whatever you have tamped down deep in there and you don't want to address and you don't want to deal with, they're going to be like, you're funny. You're going to deal with this right now.
Face it.
Wow.
Yeah, you're going to face it right now.
Wow.
Because there's no escaping yourself, and you've got this down deep. It's eating away at you.
Yes.
And whether or not you're going to, on a conscious level, actually freaking address the thing,
Sure.
or you're going to just try to ignore it, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
So the mushrooms put it there and they say, you're going to figure this out. You're going to sort through it right now. And I'm not going to let you move on from this until you do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's great. You can't walk around your guts on the floor. You got to make sure, you got to address it. Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Well said. And I mean, that made sense to me. When I read the article, I was like, that makes sense. Yes, we're creatures of habit. We're, the patterns that we create, unless we intentionally, and many of us don't, like choosing to say, you know what, I'm going to leave my career in nursing and pursue this path, as you did run out. Some people get sick or have to get fired or become so dissatisfied that it forces them to leave. Based on what you're saying, you're saying mushrooms, it brings it to your attention, so you don't wait until something forces it to happen. The mushrooms are going to cause that to happen within you and then help you to resolve it. Or think differently about it, or take a different.
They might not help you. They might not give you the answers.
Sure.
Yeah. Although
No, I feel like they lead you. Like, again, remember, like, if they're sending out signals and it's energy, I feel like that's why I feel like, right, there's spores. Like, they're guiding you all along. Like, and they're.
Yes.
Because I think people on mushrooms, like, we know, okay, we have to be conscious of things. So you're going to be that, you're already going to be in that kind of awareness or alertness to understand, like, oh, I need to be here for this specific,
Yes, for this particular thing.
And thank you for I'm like asking, like, what would the mushrooms do in this situation? Like, sometimes people don't even need the medicine. Like, I want you to get, you're afraid of the mushrooms, but there's wisdom here, okay? You can please listen to the people that are actually using the medicine and they're trying to tell you something. You don't have to take it yourself, but listen, right? And try to use, see, does it change anything, right?
Yes.
For myself.
So I know, and this is a good segue into, thank you so much, Julia. I'm gonna
switch places.
Yes. Just jump in with.
Yeah,
Renelle.
thank you so much, Karen. These are really poignant questions. Yeah.
Thanks. I really thoroughly enjoyed that article. I've shared it so many times.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the support for our platform.
No, man, it makes sense to me. It really does. And I see people struggling. I see the energies, the female and male energies are so off right now. I don't know what's going on, but
it is. We're at the final frontier. I'm telling you, it's the final to me. I've been telling it right for days. Like the gods are fighting.
It's just crazy. So tell us, Renelle, you did a little intro the other day to me. So you had you know a little bit about your background in nursing.
Like, what if I do that?
I don't know. It's all right. You see me, right?
I'm curious. I'm curious. How did you know each other? I didn't get a chance to ask Julie this. Like, how did you end up in? Because when I think about everyone that's on the team, there's only Love. Love is the only Jamaican that's actually born here and still here. Everyone else either came from the US or Canada. Now I came from the US and you somewhere else. So how did you two meet? And
so I was putting together an event. It's exactly like this topic, plant medicine, healing with yoga, food. I'm very passionate about the food, like what we put in there.
Yes.
And ganja, so I put that event together and Julie reached out and she came and then boom, it was like, right?
I think you reached out and told me about the event.
Oh, and something like that.
And she sent me
I saw maybe on LinkedIn. On
LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
She wrote me. She was like, I'm doing this event, and I was like, damn, that sounds awesome.
I just saw her. I just saw your bio.
Because she was about zero waste and sustainability and and it was yoga and the endocannabinoid system, and I was
put that event together in Zurich.
It was a great event.
But it was the first. Yeah, because I linked up with a ganja company. Metro Farm. They're called Metro Farm, and I did some work for them. Like I would go to the hospital, like meet up with the doctors, trying to get them to use CBD, as a medicine.
Okay. And when was this and where was this?
That was in
2016 or 17.
2016? This wasn't in Jamaica. This was in where?
No, that's Zurich, Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Okay.
When I discovered, this is what I should be doing, so I put together that event.
Okay.
With another friend. We were also about mothers, especially mothers, and how we get out of the system. Like, how do we empower ourselves? Because we were seeing this is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
With us letting these men lead. So we're like, we have to empower ourselves. So that's how we met.
So how do you explain this energy that I'm feeling now, where there's so much? There seems to be this inability for men. The female and male energy seems to be off.
Power.
What is happening?
It's a power struggle. It's a power struggle to me. Like we see it in our daily lives. Like it's the power struggle. We're at we women. We know we're meant to be leading now. I think it's like they say it's like been 1,000 years of us being in the dark. We're the hidden one. We're the and we bring it back everything to life. We're like, hey, nature, the medicine. We're like, hey, see us, and you can't hide us anymore because we have technology on our side. We have so much on our side. We're like struggling now because they can't hide us.
Right.
Women will have to be making tough decisions. Like, do we unite? And I'm for unity, believe me. I'm behind.
Sure. Right.
But maybe sometimes we have to disrupt the peace. The mushrooms will come in and be like, you can
disrupt. Right.
You're a warrior. Remember I was telling you, like the warrior spirit comes in.
Look at what COVID did. And I know that COVID shook the world up, and it was a disruptor. It forced us to make some changes that needed to be changed. Now we were there was attempts to push us in one direction. I didn't want to go in that direction myself, but it was a disruptor so that we could do things differently. So I see that. So tell us a little bit about your experience with mushrooms, Ranelle.
So
do
I
you
was
use them as well?
16 the first time. And I'm not ashamed to tell put it on record.
Sure.
No, I'm like 16. I was in it was graduation, like in Switzerland, you have this college or high school graduation and you go camping.
Okay.
So it was the first time I was introduced and I smoked it the first time. I smoked mushrooms and we had this beautiful lake and I was just in love. Like it was just beautiful.
Your experience.
Yeah, the experience, like I was seeing like someone just painted a beautiful picture, like the clouds were so clear, the sky.
Great.
And then that was it. I didn't do it until, I don't know, years later. Years later.
And now that because you're in the traditional field of nursing, where it's obviously not as accepted. Psychedelics are not seen as medicine. It's seen as a drug and something that's harmful to us. How did you get to the point of being so open to this when you've been schooled in the traditional medicine?
Well, I was always open to ganja because another thing that I did in high school, and I think that helped me, was I would smoke, like not regular, but I would, be at a party and someone would have a joint rather than some, would take harder stuff like, and I was a party girl. I love partying, but ganja was so easy for me, like just some ganja and music and you like party for days.
Right.
But I was always open, I think like that, to plants. I always knew the benefits of them, but I was kind of I wouldn't say I was forced to be a nurse, but it was like you have no other option kind of thing. It was like, oh, your auntie was a nurse. You always said, so that's the direction I took.
Okay.
And I'm going through school and we have like a little bit about plants, like very, they call it homeopathy. I don't know how you say it in homeopath. Like you have a little, maybe a few hours about that and then done.
Okay.
The rest is you're being you're being trained in or indoctrinated in pharmacology. But I, for myself, and what really got me out of it, I got sick, from traveling. I was 3 months in Southeast Asia and I was eating, but really bad. Everything you shouldn't do, I was doing. So I got some type of rare parasite and I was sick for like 3 years. And the doctors, they couldn't figure out. And I was like skinny like this without breastfeeding and stuff. And until, the doctor was like, let me look inside. Like I had to beg him at one point, like, please let me go to some specialist. That's another thing patients need to understand.
Yes.
Sometimes that doctor is not sending you to the right people. They keep you, right?
Yes.
And just trying to get it figured out for themselves.
Figure it out on their own rather than digging deeper, looking for. Okay.
So they went in and I had the endoscope and they saw I have this rare parasite and it was like kind of blocking, my tube. So that's why I couldn't eat. No, it was a horrible thing. The only thing that got me to eat was ganja. I remembered, like I was sick like that. So I remembered, ganja is going to help me. So I started consuming again.
Okay.
And that's when I was like, I get it. I have to get out of this field because I also had to work. It was a whole thing, you're sick, you have to work. And I was like, no one cares.
So when you say sick, when you say sick, what was the illness? What were you experiencing during this time you were?
By the time, like they were kind of shutting off my stomach, like there was no passage, so that's why I was throwing up all the time. I didn't know, like I was throwing up, and I had to go to work, and I was like, this is insane. And I saw how the system fails us, even as a nurse. So I was like, I have to get out, right? So that's when I started then, and then I think what the plants do, if you really consume it and you're like, you set your intentions, they really push you in that direction. Okay. It's like you can't get, like, if you're really focused and you're, you're paying attention, they're leading you, they're guiding you,
Okay. So
The
how did you overcome the parasite? What did you do?
Okay, so the result was they had to give me like this medicine they give to horses. When like they have to give it to horses for them to get rid of parasites. That's what I took. I had to do that like twice. Yeah.
Hey,
That parasite was
didn't want to leave.
no, because it was also going it was wild. It was going everywhere and it was
Really?
a wild time.
Wow.
So yeah. And the plant helped me through. That's why I'm so I can tell people.
seafood when you were in Southeast Asia?
No, it's like street food, you know, like, and they
Oh.
tell you don't like, and you
Don't
could,
eat
I could
street.
see it wasn't clean and no
Yes.
ice. But I'm like, woohoo, live.
No, you're gonna try it. Wow.
But again,
That's so
you know, I want people to see that needed to happen in order for me, you know, to be on my path. Like these diseases, they just don't happen for no reason. It's like
Yes.
really to push you actually.
Yes.
Look
Yes.
into it. And some people decide I'll go with the chemicals which might cure or like, you know, suppress the symptoms, but it's not addressing something that actually your being wants you to be doing, you know?
Right. Wow. Well, that's phenomenal. You also mentioned in your other when we did your initial interview about your use, or I'm not sure if you mentioned you delivered your baby,
Yes.
pretty much strawberry there behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you consume mushrooms while you were pregnant and after?
Yeah.
And what was the benefit of that?
I feel, you know, because I am going through a difficult life situation, like
Sure.
I know, like, and I want to teach people, like, you need to be medicated, like you need to medicate yourself in order to navigate through these difficult situations. Like
When you say
Because
medicate, what do you mean? When you say
medicate, like you would go to the doctor and you say, okay, you need Zoloft, right? You have depression. They will
Oh.
prescribe you Zoloft.
Okay.
That's your medication. You'll be taking that daily, 2-3
Okay.
times a day. So
Okay.
I'm saying now, when you're on your plant medicine journey, you take your ganja in the morning, you take it at midday, you know, like you're
Okay.
medicated. You can actually, because you were asking Julie, like, you know, kind of like how it helps to
Yes.
be in a relationship is
Okay.
you get triggered, but you now know, okay, you know, breathe. I can see you. I can see where you're coming from. I know you're
Sure.
traumatized. You're dealing with your trauma.
Okay.
I'm coming at you with my trauma.
Okay.
What is it about? How do we navigate the energies? You know,
Okay.
that's where the plants kind of can come in and
Perfect.
support
You know, the way in which you said that sounds like, for example, when people see other folks using either mushrooms, what looks like habitually, or cannabis habitually on a schedule,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
considered, well, you know, you're addicted. You're saying it's similar to if you were prescribed medication for some sort of
Any
issue.
depression, because
So-
what are we going through?
Well,
Each
Right.
wait,
and-
can I just interject
yeah.
really quickly? Do we say that
Okay.
somebody is prescribed to eat citrus like oranges, limes, or lemons when they've developed scurvy, right? Like our systems become deficient of certain things. We need
Yes.
to get them in diets. We
Yes.
have an endocannabinoid system. If it becomes imbalanced, then we need to supplement with extra exogenous and cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, or synthetic ones, but preferably from a plant.
Perfect.
Isn't that-
And the reason that made sense too, because when I got here, I was telling you all that I was anemic. So when I came to Jamaica, I have been eating kalaloo and beets and all that to build my
Moringa seeds can help with that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Moringa
What-
seeds.
moringa seeds.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Yo,
Or
can
even cook the leaf. Like that plant is amazing. I love moringa.
moringa. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Perfect. These are other things that I'm saying. So because of this deficiency, I have to take iron supplements 3 times a day. It used to be 2 because it was so
Yeah.
low. They said you need to take it 3 times a day. So I have to remember, this is not something I normally did,
Yeah.
to take them 3 times a day after each meal. I liken that then to also if there is a deficiency, as Julie just said, in some
your nervous system, like we have
Yes.
to, our nervous system get dysregulated. So that
Yeah.
person that's coming to you in an argument, you have to
Sure.
realize they're coming at you with full force. They're coming at you with an energy, and
Yeah.
we're energy beings, and your body is feeling low. What is both fear and all of that? And if
Yeah.
you're not aware, that
Yeah.
might throw you off because you're like, what the fuck, You're
Okay.
like, but
Alright.
the medicine will help you actually, become aware of your body, breathe, or you stay
Sure.
in your energy instead
Yes.
of going into that energy.
Ah.
Like
Okay.
it's
And
about
that
learning
is
to
so
dance, learning to dance. That's when like people
Yes.
grow. We have to get back
movement.
into
Yes.
movement.
That makes sense to me also because as Julie said, I don't know if it was an article or when we were talking, when she said that before she makes a major decision, she'll do a dive or something. And I do the same thing. I think I need to be in a different state of mind than I'm in when I'm just regularly function, to be able to see things a little bit more clearly and a little bit more objectively.
Yeah, and like go higher. That's why we
Yeah,
elevate
so-
ourselves. Like we need that
absolutely.
bird view, right? We need
Yes.
right
Yes.
because you can't, like Julie was saying, right? You can't solve your issues with
From
the same
within.
mindset
That's
or how you
correct.
went into it, right?
Oh yeah, you
Nice.
can't solve the issues with the same thinking that got you into them.
Yeah, so
But
Perfect.
I
And
also want to say that emotions are just energy in motion.
yeah,
So
that's why you move around.
so that's why
that's
you move.
nice. Makes sense. Makes sense. So when
I love people. That's why I love to get people to dance. Like we don't realize we're too much in our heads, like what the
Yes.
system does or the school, it keeps us in
Right.
our head,
yes, not in our
in
body.
the body, which has the more wisdom. Like, yes, the mind is very powerful, but
Sure.
your heart, heart, your gut, like you have so much more, and we just have to learn to balance all of
Balance them. That's true. And the one of the reasons that even during the mushroom retreat that we're planning, we wanted to end with, or at least conclude the end of the day is with dance. It's with some type of activity. And we're using Afrobeats because I don't know how people can hear Afrobeats and not move. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know how people can hear music and not move, but Afrobeats even more so.
That's beyond me too.
And
Beyond. But
ironically though,
that's my mission, get everybody to dance.
to move.
It's a movement, and I posted this one meme, but because there was a town that they started like a dance movement, and
Okay.
some of them died from the dance movement. I don't want to go that far, but I wanted, like, imagine you get a whole town just to dance and be just
Dancing.
rejoice.
Yes.
Kind of-
That is you can't even we went to a club. What happened?
No, but it was back then. They used to use the medicine. Like they used to put. Women could go and get the cannabis or cocaine, whatever. They used
Okay.
to drug us back then.
To do what? So you can dance?
Like it was like 1960s.
No, I'm just saying back then they used to give us, like, when ganja was still legal.
Well, when
Right.
I'm thinking about it, when I think about mushrooms, I think back to the 70s. Everyone just was wearing these flowery things like these pants I'm wearing, very flowery, looking very psychedelic.
Yeah.
So they had this psychedelic look. They were always dancing. They were always looking very happy.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure if what they were on, but they were. That was
They
the
were on
movement.
powerful drugs. What were they
Right.
taking in the 70s? Yeah, they
Yes.
were. Yeah. they
Really.
were so-
Yes.
I mean, all the
So-
music. Imagine, like, all these artists, like, they're
So
taking these substances,
So
helping them come up with,
Yes.
was this after 1938?
it was even older. No, it's like 80.
Because acid wasn't created until 1938.
Yeah. No, it was even older. It's like
acid. That's a whole different.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure.
Kind of, but also acid. A lot of people don't realize lysergic acid diethylamide is a ergot derivative. Ergot is a type of fungus. It's a type of bread mold. So there's
Really?
Yeah, in fact, there's a type of like lichen that has, I want to say, either merged with a fungus or it is just the lichen itself down in South America that creates also its own psychedelic. There are tryptamine psychedelics in so much of what we find in nature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's clear that the plants are saying you need to visit these spaces.
That's true. And I found what you said when we first started earlier, Julie, in terms of the whole idea of psychedelics being kept from us, because if we had them, we would be in a healing space. We would be in a different headspace to deal with things. But when every psychedelic has been made criminalized so that you don't access it, and you know, I am in that mode too, where you even mentioned acid. I was like, it sounds like something made in a lab, and I don't want that in my body. But even the word makes me want to stay away from it and not even venture down this road. So the idea of even exploring the benefits of psychedelics is a step outside of my paradigm as well. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because there are other people like me who are like, listen, I don't mess with certain things, you know, or whatever, without even knowing, without researching it further. You heard, you know, well, cocaine and all these other things are so bad for you. Without looking into it and seeing, well, what is it? And why is it bad for you? Is it how it's being used? Because people are prescribed drugs by doctors, and those are abused as well. So it's not only psychedelics that is the case. That's an individual situation. But the benefits is the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you from this perspective. Love mentioned that, you know, she's a musician. So she says, before she performs, and most musicians apparently, before they perform, they, you know, use some type of psychedelic to be able to get into a different headspace to perform better or whatever. And I can see the reasoning behind that now, especially when you're standing in front of thousands of people and perform.
Like it, you know, like they take away the fears, because all the mushrooms or the plants are showing, look, you're full of fear and there's no reason actually. Like, stop being afraid of yourself, stop being afraid of your own powers, and like live it out. So,
you touched, sorry to interject. You touched on a really important point, which is relativity. Because there are no good drugs, there are no bad drugs. There are only drugs. There are only substances, plants, and fungi, and relative to their purpose, they are either good or bad. So if you're using, for instance, if you're using acid because you want to drive better, then it's probably going to be a bad drug for you to use. But if you're using acid because you want to get in touch with your garden, that might be the perfect thing. Like, that might be the perfect substance. If you're using, you know what I'm saying? And this is what you touched on. What are the benefits of these things?
Yeah. Yes.
And
how are you using them?
How are you using them? Well, if you want to die, if you want to kill yourself, then the white angel death cap mushroom is perfect for you. Go out and find some castor bean plants and make yourself some ricin. You know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of ways, and for those purposes, they're great. Okay. If you're trying to live and have a healthy life and have your organs function, they're not so good. So it's like, I really get frustrated with that whole good drug, bad drug trope. Because they're all just drugs, and they are only good or bad relative to the purpose for which one is applying.
Wow.
I think she wants boob.
Makes sense. She's ready to eat. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. You know, we could go on and on. I'm happy we at least had this conversation. Yes, I mean, there are other questions I'm hoping it stimulates as I begin to share, and I'm always sharing Julie's article, especially with my therapist friends, because it just made so much sense to me. It made so much sense to me. And so that they too can think outside of their paradigm, their indoctrination, that we're all schooled in these formal education, and it is limited. There's always new information. Plants, they have been here, as you mentioned, and mushrooms maybe even before plants. So the wisdom that they hold is, I mean, I want that in my body. Like I mentioned to you about the weeds, you know, they're intelligent, they're killing out the grass. And I'm like, I want that in my body because I want my body to know how to fight off, ward off a threat or some, you know, I need that type of wisdom in me. And if I have to ingest the plant to get that, then that's what we should be doing. So I find myself now even using food to heal. So I need to get more iron in my blood. I'm eating differently. I'm here and I'm in the States where I have access to all the junk. When I was in Montego Bay, I was stuck in I couldn't move around and have as much access to all my, you know, sweet tooth devices that I have. And I have a serious sweet tooth. Yeah, I love sweets and it's not good for me. But having spent the last 6 weeks eating clean and eating plant-based only to deal with this low iron issue, I have no desire for that. And now I look at food differently. Before I put it in my body, I'm going, what is this? How is this going to benefit me? How is, you know, eating this chocolate bar? If it's not, it's just to make my mouth taste good. It's not going to probably do anything beneficial to my body. It's probably going to do more harm because of the sugars. Why am I eating the chocolate? You know, if I'm going to eat chocolate, I'm going to eat the right type of chocolate then.
I guess, you know, people, I'm really big on heal with food because, but I want you to see, you're still going to have this, like you just have to then choose, you know, quality. Then you're going to be like, I'm going to have this dark chocolate, this 70% from, you know, Colombia, Ecuador, you know, you're going to treat like, that's why the self-love is so important with the food. Because you're going to be like, this is healing me.
Well, we're now talking about
right? It's nurturing me. Huh?
Because you can't do one without the other. Ronell always talks about this, how it's great you went on a mushroom trip, but if you aren't changing your overall lifestyle and the things that you're consuming, the changes won't be lasting.
True.
Really, like I'm passionate about integrating, you know, because yes, you get the message, okay, you should be the one saving the world. Well, what will that take of you? Who do you need to become to be that, you know, whatever world thing?
Wow.
That's, you know, it changes, and then people have to see, oh wow, I can't be eating McDonald's because it doesn't in my brain. Like
it's not
dumb shit.
Absolutely.
Listen to dumb music, be a slave, you know?
Yes. What do you
and food? That food, you have to see, where's my food taking me?
Yes.
Who is benefiting of me being this idiot?
That's correct. So SB,